Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our event today titled Healthy Living for the Brain and Body While LGBTQ+. My name is Noelle Simino. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been the social work intern here at the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Research Center for the past year. And part of my work here has been really focused about widening our scope and increasing diversity in the people that we serve here. That's part of our goal for today's event. So I'm really excited to have our keynote speaker be Kate Pierce today. She is the program director for the Michigan chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. We're also joined by Jason Page and Shannon Echeverry, who will be here a little bit later from the Turner Senior Resource Center, and they also do collaborations with MyGen. We also have Chelsea Harvey from Dementia Friendly Celine. We have Joe Volpe and Brendan Bell from Affirmations. And we're also joined by Laura Rice Eschker from here at the MADC. So happy to have all of these community partners and everyone who's supporting this event. And we'll be able to hear from everyone a little bit later. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Kate so she can introduce herself a little bit more and she can begin her wonderful presentation. So thank you, Kate.
Hi, my name's Kate Pierce. I'm a social worker with the Alzheimer's Association. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am very excited to be talking today about healthy living for your brain as an LGBTQ plus person. Let's see if I can make this go forward. There we go. First, I would like to just say thank you to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. They are funding my program, so we, of course, always appreciate that. And my advisory board for their time and expertise. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. Our learning objectives. Let's talk about how certain behaviors affect our brains and our bodies, and talking about some strategies to help protect your brain as we age. And we're going to talk about all of that. So you can say we've got a pretty packed agenda. But first, I really like to talk about why do we specifically call out LGBTQ plus adults. If you're familiar with the Alzheimer's Association at all, we have a healthy living for your brain and body, kind of end of sentence. Why do we have this specifically for the LGBTQ plus community? And the answer is that unfortunately, LGBTQ plus individuals are more likely to report subjective cognitive decline than their cisgender heterosexual counterparts. What does that mean? Subjective cognitive decline is when someone self-reports, so says, I notice that my memory problems, my thinking is getting worse, but we can't necessarily measure it yet on our pen and paper tests that we use for dementia. Very often, subjective cognitive decline continues to decline into mild cognitive impairment, and then possibly dementia. But unfortunately, we haven't been studying, as Alzheimer's researchers, LGBTQ plus individuals as a distinct group for that long. So we haven't been able to follow these folks to see if that transition or that kind of progression into more significant cognitive changes happens or not. So that kind of more research needed, but it's certainly significant to know that they're reporting more in themselves. We know that often people know themselves best. And because, hey, because we're talking about the brain, let's talk about how it works. The brain is the control center of your body. Over 100 billion with a B nerve cells or neurons create a branching network. So each neuron kind of touches other neurons, and it's the signals traveling through those cells that forms memories, thoughts, feelings, tells your muscles to move, etc. And Alzheimer's and other dementias destroys brain cells. So actually causes damage to the brain. What you might not know is just how closely connected your heart and your brain are. And because of that, we know that what you do to protect your heart can also help your brain. So if you're looking on your screen right now, you are not looking at a picture of your brain. You're looking at a picture of, or any brain, you're looking at a picture of the vascular network, all the blood vessels that are supplying blood to the brain. So you can see it is very dense. Your brain uses a lot of nutrients, a lot of oxygen. So 20 to 25% of the blood from every heartbeat goes to your brain. So even though your brain is certainly not 20 to 25% of your body by volume or weight, it's just a really big utilizer of resources. And we know that when you're working hard, you're even thinking hard, that number can go up even higher. So if you've ever thought like, oh gosh, my brain hurts, I've been thinking so hard, like that's a real phenomenon. Your brain is actually using more resources. I think is pretty cool. Um, I do have some like questions. I wasn't coordinated enough to make them into polls, so just answer for yourself. True or false, Alzheimer's is a normal part of aging. And the answer is false. Alzheimer's and other dementias are not a normal part of aging. They're actually diseases. We know that there are some changes that we do expect as we age, but those changes are very minor. There might be some slight slowing of our thinking or our ability to solve problems. Some more challenges with like attention, how fast we can process information, or kind of needing less distractions. The classic example is you got to turn down the radio or turn off your podcast to like find the address that you're looking for. But these changes are minor and they shouldn't significantly impact your day-to-day life. It's when these changes are significant and they significantly impact that day-to-day life that we call that dementia. Now you might be thinking, Kate, you've said dementia, you've said Alzheimer's. What's the difference? It's truly the biggest question I get, most common question that I get wherever I go. And the answer is that dementia is a general term. It's kind of an umbrella. It talks about the types of problems you're having. You're having problems with thinking and memory, but Alzheimer's disease is the specific name for the changes that are happening in your brain. So it's kind of like cancer and then breast cancer, prostate cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Dementia is the same way. There's lots of different dementias. Alzheimer's is the most common one, which is why some people, even doctors who should know better, use them interchangeably. But there are over 70 different types of dementia. There are currently no cure for Alzheimer's. However, there are some drug and non-drug options that can help with symptoms and may help slow disease progression. And we know that healthy behaviors can help lower risk of dementia or even help potentially slow how quickly dementia declines over time. These are some risk factors for dementia. Age is by far the strongest risk factor for dementia. By 65, about 11% of folks. By 85, about a third. But you'll notice that these risk factors are in two different colors. And the purple ones are things we can't control. And the orangey gold ones are the ones that we at least have some control over. Certainly, we might not have control if diabetes runs in our family, but we certainly have control over how we take our medications, how we manage our diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, we know that LGBTQ plus adults have some greater health disparities, many of which are risk factors for dementia. We know that they use lower rates of preventative screenings. They tend not to go to the doctor unless it's kind of an emergency, there is an active problem. So things tend to get caught later after they've had more time to cause problems. Higher rates of depression, which is a risk factor, very understandable with the current climate. Higher rates of alcohol and tobacco use, both are risk factors for dementia, and we see those higher in LGBTQ plus adults. Some higher rates of obesity, higher risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and higher rates of HIV as well. Again, depending if you identify as a lesbian or a man who has sex with men or a trans woman, those risk factors differ. But overall, your health is more than one thing, right? It's certainly your genes, it's your family history, it's your environment, it's the air you breathe, it's the political climate that you live in and how that affects your daily stress. It's your lifestyle. What habits do you engage in that are good, that are not so good, what are you not doing that you should, etc. Um, and what we're really going to focus on today is kind of these lifestyle factors, the things that we have a fair amount of control over. Um, because we know that all of those risk factors kind of act like the proverbial straws that break the camel's back. Um, so if you're not familiar with the allegory, I'm not an English major. I do not know. But the idea is that one straw is very light. The camel can carry it very easily. It's when we start adding more and more and more and more and more and more on top of his back, eventually the load becomes too heavy. The camel's back breaks. Your brain is much the same way. Again, you have 100 billion with a B brain cells. There's a lot of redundancy built into that. But so it's designed to weather some normal aging processes, maybe some health risks, maybe some behaviors that are not so good. Um, but when we start to add all those things up, it becomes too much and your brain can't compensate anymore. And we see outward signs and symptoms of memory change, of the damage that's happening to your brain. The other thing that's really exciting is that some of these things can actually help strengthen the camel's back and help strengthen your brain to help make it more resilient when other stressors happen. So we'll talk about those habits as we go through. I've already forgotten how to advance my own slides. Um, so when we talk about health behaviors specifically, we talk about other medical conditions that are kind of the big influencers to your brain health. Again, a lot of that has to do with heart health. You're going to be sick of me saying that by the end of this. So those are your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your weight or your body mass index, and your cholesterol, and particularly in midlife. So this is not something to think about, when we're, in retirement. These are things that we should be looking at throughout the lifespan because there is evidence that it might be what happens in midlife that is even more predictive or harmful potentially or helpful than waiting. Um, and we talked about that. Uh, just important to note that good cholesterol is good for the heart, and in general, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Um, Again, true or false? It's never too early or too late to incorporate healthy habits. Is it too late for you? Should you sign off this webinar right now because there's just no helping you? Well, luckily, that is not the case. People of all ages can benefit from adding in more healthy behaviors. So hang in there with me. Um, so these are the 7 things that the Alzheimer's Association is promoting based on evidence to help protect your brain and your body as you age. So let's dive in. The first is getting quality sleep. Sleep is essential for your overall health and well-being. So we know that people that have interrupted sleep um, uh, are at increased risk for dementia as they age, as well as increased risk for things like diabetes and stroke, which increase your risk for dementia. It's also really interesting. They found that sleep is when your body repairs itself, particularly deep sleep. So all of the natural byproducts of your brain doing all of its hard work kind of get flushed out of the brain through your spinal fluid while you sleep. If you're not reaching deep stages of sleep, that repair process can't happen, and those byproducts can clump together and cause the plaques that we call Alzheimer's disease. So not as only is there risk for other health conditions that can increase your risk, there's actually a direct correlation in that way as well. Um, oh, I got ahead of myself. I get so excited about that. I think it's really interesting. And of course, also in the short term, we've all noticed that if you don't get great sleep, your memory's not the best the next day, but certainly long-term consequences as well. So just thinking about, again, how can I improve the quality of my sleep if it's not that great? What kind of environment do I need to create? What changes? How can I minimize disruptions as much as possible? And then these are the things that some things that the Alzheimer's Association would like you to think about. So controlling temperature or light. Certainly, I think a lot of us have heard the recommendation to avoid blue light from screens before bedtime, and really to talk to your doctor if you're experiencing frequent sleep problems. Because they are more than just annoying. They are potentially a big indicator of health and a predictor of future health problems. Again, no surprise here, something I'm sure your doctor has already talked to you about, but being smoke free. Smoking has a direct impact on the health of your brain. Um, Again, many studies have found that smoking increases the risk of cognitive decline and may increase the risk of dementia, as well as increasing the risk for other health conditions that are themselves risk factors. What I think is really fascinating is that quitting smoking may reduce a person's chance of developing thinking and memory problems back down to the level of someone who has never smoked. So this is not necessarily something where, like, if the damage is done, it's done. So for me, this is a really big motivator to encourage people to stop smoking, because it's like, well, even if you smoked 2 packs a day, um, there might be an ability to really significantly reduce your risk, which I think is super exciting. Um, so again, if you're a smoker thinking about, what do I personally need to stop smoking? What's available in my area? This is what the Alzheimer's recommends. You might want to think about quit lines, talking with your doctor or another healthcare professional, looking at some sort of program that works for you, whether that's, gum or patches or going cold turkey or what have you. The next is taking care of your mental health. It's really important to prioritize yourself and your own mental health and safety, making time for self care. We know that this is a difficult time to be an LGBTQ plus person. Many states, many individuals have kind of rolled back their acceptance, their um, of folks who are LGBTQ plus. And so we know that chronic stress for whatever reason is not good for the brain. And certainly the LGBTQ plus community has very good reason to be stressed. Um, uh, so pay attention to that. Pay attention to anxiety, depression, other concerns. All of these things, besides reducing your quality of life in the short term, also affect your brain health. And again, many of the things we're going to talk about today are also known to help contribute to good mental health. Uh, so hopefully, again, just another reason why you might consider trying some of these things out if you're not already. I will say, in my humble opinion, because I did not write this presentation, uh, I think the Alzheimer's Association really leans on like self-care and less on true mental health. So yes, should you be thinking about what things you enjoy doing, how you can build breaks, how you should focus on self-care? There are 2 L's in self-care. Great. Um, but also looking at, do I need medication? Do I need a support group? Do I need to talk with a therapist? I think they've missed an opportunity there to normalize that and talk about how that can be really useful. So these are their self-care. I don't think anyone's ever sung a song themselves out of depression. So if that applies to you or someone you know, encouraging them to get the help they need, I think is really important. Soapbox removed, Kate off. Um, Next is to get moving, to be physically active. That can improve your brain health. Again, not a crazy statement, right? This is something that when we go to our physical, if you go to a physical, your doctor is probably already talking to you about. Because again, we know that cardiovascularly exercise is good for your cardiovascular health. And again, good for your heart, good for your brain. Cardiovascular activity also good for reducing your risk of cognitive decline. And there's actually fairly strong evidence for this. So they did a survey of brain researchers, Alzheimer's researchers, and they said, like, what's the number one thing you would recommend people do? And it is almost unanimously getting more physical activity. Um, Happily, again, this is not an all or nothing thing. So any increase in movement and getting your heart rate up is better than none. So I'm not saying that everyone has to go out and run a marathon tomorrow. Um, Ideally, the recommendation is 150 minutes of exercise that gets your heart rate up per week. However, there is no research that says you have to do it in any which way. So you could do 3 50-minute sessions, 10 15-minute sessions, or anything in between. And again, there is kind of a dose response. So, any little bit is still shown to be helpful. So it's not all or nothing. So again, thinking about what do I want to try? Like, how can I build more physical activity into my average day rather than, hitting the gym if that's doesn't make sense for you? Who can I ask to join me? Who can help me stay accountable? Again, like you've heard many times in the past, I'm sure, walk around your neighborhood, park farther away, take the stairs more often, all of that stuff. Those short amounts of physical activity will add up, and that's useful. Um, Try something fun. It doesn't have to be running on a treadmill. It doesn't have to be running at all. It can be anything you like. And again, ask people to join you. More likely to be held accountable and enjoy yourself while you're doing it. Again, not an earth-shattering recommendation. Eat healthy. Eating an overall healthy diet can help reduce your risk of many diseases. Um, Again, good heart healthy diet, good brain healthy diet. Uh, has a lot of face validity on it. That nutritious food is fuel for the brain. And as you likely know, that eating a healthy diet can help reduce your risk of heart disease and cancer, but also Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, stroke, and diabetes. So lots of risk factors for dementia in there, or dementias themselves in there. If you were going to twist my arm and say, Kate, what book should I read? What diet should I follow? These are the two that we recommend. So this is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension and the Mediterranean diet. People do hours long, days long workshops on both of these, so I'm not going to do that here. But key elements of both are an emphasis on fruits and vegetables, nuts, beans, and whole grains, lean meats, fish, and poultry, substituting in healthier fats, and limiting your sugar and your salt. Again, the stuff that you read in your women's magazines, you hear on the news, you hear at your doctor's office all the time. Um, so again, if this is something that you're interested in, thinking about, how can I change my method of preparation to make my meals healthier? Instead of deep frying, can I get an air fryer? What healthy food can I swap in? Like instead of a hamburger, can I have a turkey burger? What looks interesting at the grocery store? What, zany fruit or vegetable or, different bread or cracker can I try? Um, So these are the tips that they suggest you think about. Substituting olive oil instead of butter, using non-salt seasoning, thinking more about what you can add to your plate instead of what you can take away, and thinking more about building meals around vegetables, grains, vegetables, beans, and whole grains rather than fattier cuts of meat. One important thing I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about is vitamins and supplements. You might think, oh, a good healthy diet has a nice wide array of vitamin and supplements. I'm not 100% there yet with my diet, so I'm gonna, you know, take a vitamin, take a something over the counter to kind of cover my bases. Oh, I heard that antioxidants are good for dementia. There's a thing about blueberries. Um, Unfortunately, they have found that there's something about eating those vitamins and those nutrients in food form rather in supplement form um, that makes them more useful. So, vitamins and supplements are not recommended by the World Health Organization or the Alzheimer's Association to help reduce the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. As you may or may not know, over the counter supplements and the like are not regulated by anyone. So they can kind of say whatever they want. I could take the label off a box of Tic Tacs and call it Kate's, memory elixir and sell it and be in the clear. Um, so just be aware that people often prey, advertisers often prey on people's fear, understandable fear of cognitive change and make some kind of outrageous claims. So focus instead on your nutrition, your food. Um, and if you have concerns about deficiencies or you hear about something, talk with your healthcare provider. I think this is my last question, but I could be wrong. True or false? Challenging your brain may help lower your risk of cognitive decline. Can you think your way out of cognitive decline? Well, I'm mentioning it because it's true. We know that continuing to challenge our minds as we age can actually help lower the risk of cognitive decline. There is something to use it or lose it. Um, uh, and there's benefits both in the short term and in the long term for your brain. Um, And so what we're learning is that keeping your mind active forms new connections among those brain cells. So it's again those filling with the B cells in your brain, new cells are starting to touch together. We also know that cognitive engagement encourages blood flow to the brain, and again, your brain is very high resource utilizer. So more blood is bringing more nutrients to your brain. Um, Interestingly, mentally stimulating activities may possibly maintain or even improve cognition. Certainly, no one has mental activity their way out of dementia. Um, but there has been some evidence that people see some small improvements in healthy controls, or that decline might be slowed for folks that do have memory diagnoses. Uh, and a particular shout out to engaging in formal education that can help keep your brain health and provide protection against developing dementia. So, just by being here today and engaging in this formal lecture, you're doing something healthy for your brain. Pat yourself on the back. What's important to know that when we talk about mental stimulation or cognitive engagement, it's keeping our minds active and challenged. Um, So the example I like to give is like watching a movie you've seen a million times and can recite, probably not that much cognitive engagement. Watching a new movie or watching the news, a little better. Talking about the news or the movie with someone and what did this mean to you and why do you think they did that? Kind of the most cognitively engaged. Similarly, um, for me personally, I like to sew. I'm at an age where a lot of my friends and colleagues are having babies. I can sew burp cloths and bibs in my sleep. So that's not a cognitive activity for me. But when I teach my best friend how to do it and she's like really struggling and having trouble, that is for her. Similarly, if I were to get a new pattern and wanted to like recover my couch, that would be a cognitive activity for me because I'm, learning new skills and something I already know how to do. Um, and also, it does not have to be anything specific. So it doesn't have to be puzzles or brain games or crosswords. It can really be anything that you have interest in. So this is a great excuse to start a new hobby or expand your skill set in an existing hobby. What sounds fun? What sounds interesting? What are you going to want to spend time doing and figure out? What do I always want to learn more about? Like, is it time to learn a new language or take audit a class at the community college? So yeah, all things, and truly these tips could be infinite. There is no right or wrong way to do this. Next, and I believe last, is stay connected. Maintain your connections with other people. We know that staying socially engaged can have many health benefits. Um, but truthfully, this is the one that's kind of the most nebulous in terms of like correlation and causation. We know that people that stay socially engaged live longer and have fewer disabilities of all kinds. Um, and there's some the hypothesis is that those who feel well connected tend to make healthier choices, right? You're, going to go to your doctor's appointments. You're going to, go on a walk with a friend. You're going to go see a movie and talk about it with, a family member, etc. Um, and so the best guess right now is that that's how it's supporting our brain health. Again, there is not necessarily a right or wrong way to do that. It's how do you like to do that? Do you have a small group of friends you like to hang out with? Is it family? Is it you like to volunteer? Is it that you want to join a formal club versus you want to do things informally? No right or wrong way uh, to do that. So again, lots of ways to do that. Volunteering, just scheduling phone calls, video chats, just chit chatting. That's good for your brain health. So if your partner complains that you're, on the phone too much, now you have a reason. Um, getting out, being in events, being with other people, even going out to a restaurant and chatting with the waitress, that's all good for your brain. So, in conclusion, these are all the ways that you can help support your brain. Um, Certainly, I don't expect anyone to go out of here and make changes in every single one of these. That would be overwhelming. But I hope you saw one or two that you think, yeah, I can make a couple changes there. I've always needed an excuse to go and take that ceramics class or whatever it might be, and you use me as that excuse. And then, of course, adding more in as you incorporate that, whatever you chose into your life. Last but not least, just wanted to give a quick shout out to my employer, the Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Association. And I say it that way because we go by the Alzheimer's Association. You see it in our logo in the bottom, but we really provide care and support and so much more to anyone that has any sort of memory, thinking, cognitive change, or even just has a concern about it. So we have a helpline where we can provide information and referrals. We have support groups, education programs. We have care counselors who can help, write up a plan of what does life need to look like with a diagnosis or as I'm caring for someone. We have opportunities for social engagement to be with people who just get it and not have to worry about being embarrassed. We have clinical trial matching service. We have online resource finder and message boards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to open it up to questions if anyone has any. I know I blew through that. Or maybe I was just so thorough that you're thinking to yourself, I couldn't possibly need to know anything more.
I have a question. I just didn't want to butt my way in here. Thank you, Kate and Noelle and community partners and peers here, caregivers. Wanted to ask about, I was struck by the 29% subjective report for adults, and that's not just older adults who are partnered or not. This is the caregiving context is something I'm particularly interested in. And just wondering from your perspective, like what you see as one of the primary concerns in this context and for LGBTQ plus caregivers, and what we would need to know would be different to be able to reach forward and to consider, which is part of memory loss concerns, but also before someone even is diagnosed. Like we could be doing a better job reaching here. I'm curious your thought.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's interesting because if there's more people that are potentially going to be having more significant memory problems, we know that statistically, um, folks who are LGBTQ plus are less likely to have children, are more likely to live alone. They're already more likely to be caregivers as it is right now compared to cisgender heterosexual individuals. It's 1 in 5 versus 1 in 6. And they're more likely to care for someone that's an age peer. So it's not like a son or a daughter caring for a parent. It's, you know, one 70 or 80-year-old caring for another 70 or 80-year-old, which has challenges as physical abilities change and your health needs change for the caregiver as we age. So I'm very interested to see as the research progresses and kind of is following this kind of first cohort of LGBTQ plus individuals that researchers are studying to see does the subjective cognitive decline truly kind of transform into MCI and dementia, or does it not? And I'm also really interested to see if that number shifts as the years go on, because a lot the historical trauma of being LGBTQ plus as someone who's now 60, 70, or 80 is probably different than someone who, came out in and is now, 20 or 30. So hopefully as society continues to move forward and be more accepting and do all those things that like that chronic stress, that underutilization of medical resources will change, and we'll see that that will also reduce that number, but that's unfortunately decades away from knowing. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and my second question, which is around, the the historical stress, different generational needs, and as we all are catching up in our services to adapt and to meet people, hopefully before, and right at that spot of need rather than delayed support, which often happens too. So thank you very much.
Sure, thank you for that's a great question.
I also wanted to thank you, Kate, for that presentation. It was so thorough, and a lot of it was thought-provoking about changes we can make. One of my initial thoughts is about, I know it's really easy to suggest all of these changes, but also acknowledging the chronic stress and like thinking from a social justice lens. It can be a lot harder for people of the LGBTQ plus community to take the steps to make these changes. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that a little bit about the barriers to making these changes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly barriers for all of us. But again, thinking about statistically, people that are LGBTQ plus tend to have less financial resources because of historical discrimination in hiring practices, because of lack of access to marriage benefits and the tax benefits that go along with that. So yeah, it's hard to get that YMCA membership. It's challenging to buy healthy foods. Healthy food is expensive. We've all been to the grocery store lately. Food is expensive, period. So those are certainly barriers. And again, in my work with other LGBTQ plus agencies, I think what we're all finding is it can be challenging for folks to go out and be their authentic self in spaces that are not LGBTQ plus specific. And there really aren't a ton of LGBTQ plus elder resources. I know my gen, certainly we at the Alzheimer's Association would like to think of ourselves as allies, but for many folks that did face historical discrimination, did face, real pushback based on just who they are as a person, they might not feel comfortable going out and joining just any old, exercise group or any old community college class or whatever it might be, depending on, and certainly there's different areas in our state that are more or less affirming and accepting and welcoming and have more specialized programs. So yeah, it's certainly, I recognize that it is a challenge to make changes in your life, period, for anyone, and certainly for folks that identify as LGBTQ plus, that's extra challenging. On the other hand, speaking to having LGBTQ plus specific programs, speaking with my cohort or counterparts in other agencies, also find that some folks don't want to go to that. They don't want to be seen going into that. They don't want to, or that's not the core of who I am. I shouldn't have to go to a special aerobics class just for LGBTQ plus folks. So that can be really hard to get those things off the ground and continued, because people don't want to go to those things for specific things for various reasons. So I think that's a real challenge for any of us that are working in this space, that I don't know that I have a great answer to.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, though. That was a good answer and acknowledging all of the challenges and those that are specific to the LGBTQ plus community. And I think it's true that it's nice to have welcoming spaces, but also sometimes it's hard to join those welcoming spaces too. So yeah, thank you for that, Kate.
Of course. Thing I would say, if you're listening and you're not comfortable being on camera, you're not comfortable, you're not Zoom friendly and you don't know how to type anything into the chat, I'm also more than happy to answer questions individually. So I will put my information into the chat, or you can reach out to Noelle, who has been sending you these things, and she can connect you with me if you'd prefer to do something a little more one-on-one. So
Yes, and if, like Kate said, feel free to email either her or myself with questions, either specific to her presentation or not. But if nothing else is coming up right now, I'd be happy to move forward into our talks with our community partners. So if that sounds all right, I would love to get started with Jason. I see you're here on the call. Jason is from the Turner Senior Resource Center. And he's also working in collaboration with MyGen. So, Jason, if you would like to unmute and talk a little bit about the services that you offer, feel free to. And if not, we can always circle back. I know Jason had a couple other obligations to go through this morning, so we can always circle back. But next, we can move on to Chelsea Harvey, who is from Dementia Friendly Celine. Thank you, Chelsea. Feel free to unmute and talk a little bit about what you offer at DFS.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. I'm Chelsea Harvey. I'm the Director of Programming at Dementia Friendly Celine. And joining me as well is Lori Venable. She is one of the founding members, an executive board member, and the coordinator, there she is, of our memory cafes. So Dementia Friendly Celine is a small nonprofit based in, but not limited to, Celine. And our mission is really to make living in the community less difficult and more dignified for those living with dementia. We like to say that persons with dementia are a part of, not apart from our community. And as so many of you know, up to 70% of people living with dementia are still living in the community. They're banking, they're shopping, they're eating out. And we want to make that possible for them, not just in Saline or even just in Washtenaw County. But we have a couple of different focuses. One is community education. We do that primarily through free workshops. We work with an organization called Dementia Friendly America. We use their sort of curriculum. We'll go anywhere and do a free workshop virtually or in person to teach, again, banks, restaurants, builders we've met with how to be a little friendlier to their customers or clients or members with dementia. And the second focus is creating safe, judgment-free, and fun events that are curated specifically for persons living with dementia and their care partners, their family, their friends, and anybody in the community who wants to join in the fun, frankly. We have memory cafes, again, that is Lori's forte, in Saline, usually twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month. We have our dementia-friendly movies that are once a month at the Imagine Theater in Saline. We are starting as of August 1st a dementia-friendly chorus that's going to meet for 12 weeks and give a performance at the end. That's open to everybody in the community, but again, curated to meet the specific needs of people with cognitive changes. And then we're also kind of starting on a third focus, which is programs that support care partners specifically. And MADC was so kind in sort of helping us build out the programming for our sort of newest venture called Caregiver Companions. It's a one-on-one support program for someone who is caring for a person living with dementia. So instead of a support group where everyone meets, we pair folks up with somebody who is a little farther along in their caregiving journey and who wants to reach back and support somebody who may need it. And our founder is Dr. Jim Manji. Most of you know him. Everyone seems to. Yep, I see all the faces. He gets around. He could not be here today. He's sorry about that. But if you don't know, he founded Dementia Friendly Celine because he is in the 70s living with Alzheimer's. So he was sorry he couldn't be here today. He sent Lori and I to stand in, and we appreciate you guys having us. We're always looking to find ways to be more friendly to everybody, including the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you for speaking about dementia-friendly Celine, Chelsea. And I think it's so important to keep people who've been diagnosed with dementia or mild cognitive impairment involved in the community. I think they can often feel isolated and not welcome in a lot of community spaces, but making sure organizations like banks and restaurants and places such as that are welcoming and know how to interact with people who have dementia is so important. So I really respect your work, and I'm so glad that you're here and learning more about how to also support the LGBTQ plus community. And Lori, thank you so much also for being here. Not to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to say anything else about memory cafes, you are welcome to say anything else. But yeah, just wanted to give you an opportunity to say anything else.
I think Chelsea covered everything beautifully.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. Thank you so much for being here, Chelsea and Lori. So next, I would like to pass the mic to Joe Volpe and Brendan Bell, who are both here from Affirmations. They'll talk a little bit about what they offer. So thank you so much for being here, and feel free to unmute and talk about the services that you offer.
Hello, yes, thank you so much for having us. I can kick us off and then I'm going to kick it over to Joe. So my name is Brendan, I use he pronouns, and I am the care manager here at Affirmations Community Center in Ferndale. If you've never been here before, we'd love to have you come to our center. Just to give you kind of like a general idea of who we are and what we do, if you're not familiar with us at all, we are a community center in Ferndale. Our goal is to create a very affirming space for anyone, and specifically for our, queer family. However, our center is open to anyone. We think of ourselves as Ferndale's community center just as much as anything else. So we're here to offer services to the community, and we have a pretty broad spectrum of services that we provide. I'm going to cover just a little bit, and then Joe is going to cover a little bit more. So I work in our Health and Human Service Department of Affirmations Community Center. And so kind of talking a little bit in the realm of what Kate was mentioning in terms of some of the determinants of health that can lead into Alzheimer's and other potential things, health complications later in life. A lot of the work we do is how can we increase quality of life, specifically for queer people. And so we have now a pretty robust therapy program here at Affirmations. We have 5 full-time, fully licensed therapists that are ready to see clients. We also have now we have 2 part-time therapists, as well as 2 to 10 master's level interns, all working from a perspective of LGBTQ affirming, as well as all that encompasses. So just thinking, how can we be as non-judgmental, as inclusive as possible, and not just, yeah. So that has been really great. And then I specifically work in coordination with that. I am the care manager, and so I do a lot with like wraparound services and care coordination. So as many of you probably are aware of as well, working with what we call those social determinants of health. So making sure, are people housed? Are people fed? Do you have access to transportation? And so I work on programming to help increase access to those things. I coordinate a food pantry that we offer once a month here at our center. I coordinate a free legal clinic that we have once a month, as well as we partner with Community Housing Network to do a housing clinic for people experiencing homelessness once a month. And then I run a virtual name change and gender marker change clinic, going through what is the process right now to change your name here in the state of Michigan, as that is a significant issue, especially for our trans and non-binary members of the community. And then, of course, I also meet one-on-one with people who are experiencing significant barriers to getting their basic needs met. And I work with them to identify what are those barriers, how can I help you navigate around those barriers, and direct you to some of the resources that could be beneficial for you. So that's a little bit about what we do in Health and Human Services, and I will pass it off to Joe to tell you more about programming.
Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe. I use he and they pronouns, and I'm the programs manager at Affirmations. Programs at Affirmations is basically the department centered in creating community building opportunities for folks in the queer community at all stages of life. So community building, by that I also mean spaces to explore oneself, express identity maybe for the first time, and engage in opportunities to learn alongside each other. So it starts with our youth programs, which covers everything from leadership and job readiness training to casual community space in our drop-in center. It also includes other additional opportunities like summer internships, a youth advisory council, arts and culture programming, really any kind of opportunity we can get to offer youth. We do either through our own services or through partnerships, like a recent partnership in providing sex education to youth. But on the adult side, our primary way of offering programming to queer adults is in our support and discussion groups. Right now, we have almost 30 groups that meet both in person and virtually. And those cover a variety of different categories. Some of the biggest categories include like identity-based. So we have a couple groups that serve specifically trans and non-binary folks, but also like a women's group, a men's group, and especially one of our strongest and largest groups, our senior coffee group that meets twice a week, both at our center and at Royal Oak Community Center. These groups serve anywhere from like 3 to 50 people a week per group. So over the course of the year, can serve up to 5 to 6,000 people. It also covers areas of like recovery. We have a variety of anonymous groups and those other similar recovery-based groups. Then inserting a little bit more fun into that space, we've got activity-based groups, including a writing group, a billiards group, a book club, and we're always looking for ways to expand those and taking proposals from community members to start their own group with us. So those are always a great option for folks seeking either just services or more so space to exist and experiment. I lastly just want to highlight some of our partnerships that we do. As I talk about like aging, going from youth to adult programs, we also do a lot of work with MyGen and collaborate with them and other organizations in ways in which we can serve our elder population. But that's kind of the best view of what our programs department looks like. We often go a lot hand in hand and work side by side with Brendan and our Health and Human Services team. So yeah, happy to be here and share space with you all.
Thank you so much, Brendan and Joe, for talking about what Affirmations has to offer. I've heard a lot of things about the great work that you guys do, and I'm happy to learn now about the wide variety of services that you have, including the food pantry and the support groups, and now the therapy programs in place. That is all wonderful to hear about. So thank you. Thank you for both speaking to that. Now I would like to pass the mic over to Jason Page, who is from the Turner Senior Resource Center. So feel free to unmute and talk about the services that you offer, Jason.
First, my name is Jason Page, and I'm with the Turner African American Services Council at Michigan Medicine, which is one of the 13 programs under Community Health Services. And as I've been working in this space, I just noticed that there's really a lack of resources and just social media groups for older LGBTQ individuals. So 30 of my hours are part of the Turner African American Services Council, which is to bridge the gap with health disparities for older and underserved local older African American adults in the community. But then part of my time is with the Turner Senior Wellness Program, which is a senior center here in Ann Arbor. And I collaborated or partnered with MyGen to bring a LGBTQ Pride and Aging Coffee and Chat to Washtenaw County. It's a regular meetup group. I'm going to share the flyer in the chat. And we're going to be meeting twice a month. And we just actually had our session today, so I apologize. That's why I was running late to this. But please share this flyer the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. From 1 to 3, we're going to have a coffee and chat here at the Turner Senior Resource Center. It's open to the public, and it seems as though the coffee and chat, we're going to have excursions or events and gatherings outside of the coffee and chat. Our first one will be August 3rd for Ann Arbor Pride, in which if you know anybody that would like to meet up with other older adults in the community, MyGen will have a booth, and that will be the location that people will be meeting up at. So, and that's it for me. And we've only had 2 coffee and chat sessions, so please share and promote as much as possible. We've had about 10 attendees each session, which is a really good start, and it seems as though there's a lot of interest around it. And last but not least, the Ann Arbor Community Foundation will be coming out with another grant cycle next month, and they informed me that one of the priorities will be LGBTQ funding. So if you're looking for grant funding, I highly recommend looking at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation.
Thank you so much, Jason, for sharing about the new coffee and chat group. It's especially important to have social engagements for LGBTQ plus older adults who may have felt isolated for a lot of their lives. And now it's beautiful to have open spaces where they can come and acknowledge their identities. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll be sure to share your flyer as well so that more people know about this opportunity and can attend. Next, I would like to pass the mic over to Laura Rice Eschker from the MADC. She is the director of the Wellness Initiative here. So I'll let you unmute and talk a little bit about the services that we offer.
Hi, everyone. I use she, her pronouns, and just taking in everything I've been hearing and learning, and really encouraged because this is not a gathering that we've had before, at least virtually. And it's so lovely to be at the table and learn more about your organizations, and really think, sitting back from my seat in the wellness space, and also in looking at care partnering and living with symptoms and what we put forward here at the MADC. And as Kate had said, you know, there are ally groups and really making spaces welcoming and really improving our competency. And then there's something very different, offering specific programming. And so that's where we're not. You know, we are wanting to keep our doors warm and open to everybody, and yet there's so much more to learn. So thank you also for showing up to teach us, and hope this conversation can continue even as we look at care partnering. So I'm going to share this slide briefly, only so I can also keep my own train of thought, because I am just so delighted and thinking hard about what's possible here for connections. So all this to just say that you know, we're challenged to think about what we've been offering and for how long, and the ways that we do that, right? So through a binary lens, a care partnering lens can be, in a dyad way, very binary, and in addition to being heteronormative. So sometimes internalize our programs were structured this way, but also thinking carefully with your feedback, and for those who will be listening to this later, how to keep this welcoming. So all of our programs, with the exception of one Lewy body group, are on are virtual. So there is some safety in approaching and trying something on here without, as Kate had mentioned, kind of entering and feeling you know, uncertain. So ways to test that out, but also you know, different kinds of dosing. So one thing that we're committed to in the range of offering programs is looking at training, well-being, and self-care in the lens of going through hard things. We want the comfort of our sort of self-care, but also like the hard self-care that we need to return to over and over and through many, many years. And so why it's designed this way, from monthly to weekly to more intensive series to what's ongoing and special programs like this. And kudos to Noelle for bringing everyone to the table today to say that, you know, what you need and what we need going forward programs for care partners as well as adults with memory loss is to try something on and see if what fits without feeling like a big commitment. And this way, what we've learned over time is that people come in and out of our programs over many years, and everything from grieving programs to anticipating stress and grief, as well as learning some deep skills of self-care to mitigate the real hardship of the day-to-day in dementia family care partnering, and putting care partnering forward, as well as being able to have peer groups like Mitten Minds. We have so much to say about what we offer, and I don't want to not mention the more specific Lewy body dementia initiative as well. So what has been specifically targeted as special spaces, and then how we create more comfort within them for what is for care partners. So programs that are for care partners, as well as programs that are specifically designed for adults who are living with symptoms. So just want to mention the range here without getting into the weeds, and just thank you all again for your commitment to what you do, and for keeping conversations like this going so that we can improve what we do with what we already have, but also thinking more innovatively, as Jason was encouraging us to look at not only funding, but ways we might be able to show up. So thank you for those reminders.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Laura. Thank you for talking about everything that we have to offer here and ways that we're continuing to grow and the way that we're expanding everything that we offer to be more inclusive and more diverse. So I really appreciate each of our community partners that have stepped forward today and been seated at the table to talk about different services. And I think it's interesting that we ended up having a more professional group today. It's kind of interesting to have a space maybe where we can network and talk about what different programs we offer and what might be missing. So I would love to take the next 20 minutes or so to have a community conversation to talk about the programming that we each offer, the differences, and questions for each other about different programs. So I invite everyone to unmute and ask questions or make comments, and also feel free to use the chat as well if you don't feel comfortable unmuting. But yeah, I welcome anyone to pose questions or make comments to the group.
Well, I will just start things off real quick. To those of you who didn't hear me earlier, my name is Stephanie, and I am the Education and Events Coordinator at the Michigan Alzheimer's Disease Center. And I just wanted to extend the invitation to all of the groups here that if you are interested in ever hosting a dementia-specific talk, contact me. I would love to have one of our doctors or neuropsychologists come out and just give you the basics to any of your folks. We have topics on grief, which Teresa does. She's on this call. Hi, Teresa. We do topics on just what's normal aging in the brain, what's abnormal aging in the brain. That's always a really popular one because people, will often come to my tables and be like, "Oh, I misplaced my keys. Is that normal? Is that bad? I'm really nervous." And just to kind of, give people an idea of what normal aging versus abnormal aging in the brain looks like. We do, just a whole variety of different talks. So if you're interested in bringing somebody in, please contact me. I will put my information in the chat here. So.
I will ask a question of the group, if I may. As a couple of you expressed, also, we are certainly an ally, but we don't have any program specific to the LGBTQ plus community, but we want to be as openly welcoming as possible. But sometimes it's hard to know how to do that or where to be reaching out to, where to promote. So if anybody has any recommendations, we would love to hear them. Don't all jump in at once.
For some reason, I really thought Joe was going to say something, but Jason has his hand up.
What organization I apologize since I came into the meeting late. What organization
So
are you with?
I'm with Dementia Friendly Celine.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Maybe even conducting just having a caregiver discussion group just for LGBTQ plus individuals. Having events like that. Maybe even having a one-off caregiver event activity that would be interested for older adults, and it might be like a respite. For an example, Exhale Wash. You probably collaborate with Exhale program, the Washtenaw health network, maybe giving older LGBTQ, older adults respite and for them to get engaged in meaningful activity. And it might bring in more awareness of your organization. That just comes to mind, just partnering.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
I would say some of the things we try to do is we try to have like a statement of inclusivity on like our website. It's not always practical to have it on like every flyer. Or like the pride flag on a flyer. So just again, a small signifier that people are welcome. I've also found that it's been really helpful in our journey to just show up in LGBTQ plus spaces. So going to the MyGen Affirmations Health Fair, going to Pride, going to wherever, and kind of the more people see you, the more comfortable they are in attending. But I'll also say, just because someone doesn't come out and say I'm LGBTQ, doesn't mean that you're not already serving those folks, and you just don't know it. So
Also
yeah.
looking at all documentation and from in terms of verbiage, thinking of the lens as an inclusive language. And ironically, actually, part of the reason why I was late to this is Washtenaw County senior leaders. We are conducting for the meeting in September panel discussion on LGBTQ inclusivity for organizations to think from those lens. And I'm trying to build out a panel. And I think I have it pretty much primarily built out. We're thinking from those lens of how can we serve the LGBTQ plus community and be open and yeah. So if you're not part of Washtenaw County Senior Leaders, definitely you should be, and it's like $10 to be a part of it.
Wonderful.
So
Thank you.
the networking group.
I just wanted to jump in and say too, and Kate, I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to say as well, more than likely you probably are serving queer people. And I know especially older queer people, there's a lot of internalized homophobia, transphobia. And so it's not always going to be overt. A lot of it is covert. And so there's definitely a lot of trust that needs to be built between providers and whomever and the individual person to like come out in any way, shape, or form. I've noticed in a lot of, and I have no idea what like any of your forums or anything look like, but I've noticed in a lot of different spaces, especially healthcare spaces, there's just a lot of things around queerness that are just not even asked about. And I've noticed this even in like the housing world because I do a lot with emergency housing as well. Like I think there's a lot of numbers with queer people that are just very underreported for these exact same reasons. Because queer people mask, they don't say they're not going into emergency shelter being like, I'm gay. Like they don't want that attention because they're afraid of that rejection. And so I think a lot of us, like when we go into spaces, we look for very subtle clues to know, is this a safe place for me to be myself or not? And so if it is, then maybe we'll be more open. And so I think like one of the main things I look for is like when I'm given an intake form for anything, do they even ask about pronouns? Because that's like automatic indicator. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They know things like about things. And I'm like, great. And then other things are just like when I'm talking to like any sort of anyone, are they just like do they just make assumptions about me? Do they assume I am interested in having a partner? Do they assume that if I am interested in having a partner, that it's going to be someone of the opposite gender? And like, just like I think as queer people, we just are so like we just like pick up on small things. And so I think like a lot of it really is just buy-in from staff and willingness to like be open to like training and greater understanding and awareness and education around um, how to kind of work around some of those things that queer people pick up as like microaggressions, essentially.
I would say there's
That was
also
so
a
helpful.
particular challenge. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over someone. Someone was talking.
No, it's okay. I said earlier, I live in a rural area. My internet connection is terrible. So half the time I'm not getting what everyone else is getting. But thank you so much. That was so helpful. And that is, I think, at our next monthly staff meeting, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit as a staff, and make sure that we are, thinking about some of those things. Thank you.
I would also say, as someone who's running programs not only with staff but with the wider public, I think you have an additional challenge in getting people's comfort in disclosing their, their LGBTQ plus status, because they have to know that not only are the staff LGBTQ plus friendly, but like every individual in that room is. And certainly knowing that, LGBTQ plus individuals were not always welcomed in society in the past, even more so than now, knowing that folks, with dementia are dealing with disinhibition, they're dealing with, all of those other things. I think you particularly have just an extra challenge, because you can't guarantee that everyone shows up is going to be LGBTQ plus friendly or affirming. And so I think you're just going to have a harder hill to climb. So my 2 cents.
Yeah, something I was considering kind of related to that is maybe having like a non-discrimination statement on the website or on certain flyers, knowing that if someone does disclose their LGBTQ plus identity and maybe there are people in the space that aren't accepting, knowing that administrators or people on the staff there will step in and advocate on their behalf and let other people know that that type of behavior is not acceptable, and knowing that people will be there to support them even if there is discrimination. So I think that comes with being trained in a staff. And I also second what other people were saying about more of the covert language that is used, making sure you're not making assumptions and things like that. So yeah. I wanted to offer up another question. I know everyone's been talking about the different services that we offer, what exists already. I'm curious if anyone has any initial thoughts about what resources might be missing, what we aren't covering yet, and what could exist. If anyone has suggestions about what areas we could all grow in, what programs aren't being offered yet.
Just off the top of my head, I think of just like a community center, really in Ann Arbor in particular. I know that people on this Zoom meeting are not all in Ann Arbor, but Ann Arbor in particular kind of lost a lot of its community resources prior to COVID, with Outbar and Common Languages being dissolved, and now it's going to be high-end condos. So I really feel like in Ann Arbor in particular, it's just like a desert. And we just really lack just a community space.
Is there no talks for the Gym Toy Center to become an actual center again?
Not that I'm aware of, and I actually need to touch base. I know they're putting on August 3rd Pride, but I don't know other than that and that's a major, don't get me wrong, that's major event to conduct, but I'm not sure what else they're doing. So I really do need to touch base just to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it is really unfortunate. And I mean, of course, there's NECDO on Pride night, which is Friday night, but that's more for college students. It's not, there's really a lack of space for LGBTQ individuals.
I will say, from my own very biased lens, because I work with this population, I think there's a real desert of spaces for folks that are long-term survivors of HIV, which we know disproportionately affects the LGBTQ plus community. And as someone who comes from a geriatric background and knows about senior centers and social engagement and all that stuff, there's just really not a place for folks to connect and get services and give each other support in a way that I think could be useful. But again, I think it's that, dual, triple stigma of I'm getting older, I have HIV, so I think again, that's a real barrier to people coming, attending, not even wanting that, to show up, pop up on your email and have someone look at it over your shoulder or pop up on your cell phone. So
I have a question and a wondering. So appreciate all of you and your insights and learning more. Something that I explored last month in support of Pride and wrote about as an open question, which was around, what do we have to learn from the queer community for those who are caregiving from a different context, and to open up that conversation for closeness and learning. And one of the things that I've noticed in my career is how LGBTQ plus care partners are very resourceful in creating at times more community and a broader sense of what a care team is. And I think that that's a really healthy step, and curious about that conversation to normalize that. We see so many people who isolate and clamp down either alone or with one person, and it's just not sustainable, at least not in the future of aging in America. And I'm certainly guessing with the risks that you've shared, Kate, and what else is happening. And so if you have anything to say about that, since you're all here at the table now, I'd be really curious about that.
I know my gen has a relatively new caregiver support group for LGBTQ plus individuals, and it's not limited to dementia caregivers, it's everyone. And I don't know if Joe or Brendan know how well attended that is, because I think it's at Affirmations. I don't think it's virtual. I don't know if you've seen like a big influx of people or on that day or time or whatever. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, as the generations age and, families, biological families dwindle and no one's having, 5 kids anymore in the same way that they used to. I think that families of choice and, and just local family, because families are certainly much more spread out than they used to be. I think you're right. There is a lot to learn from how LGBTQ plus communities have organized care.
Something I would love to add into this conversation too is I'm on a coalition called the Homes Coalition, which is a coalition for housing for LGBTQ seniors in the Detroit area specifically, but also Michigan broadly. And something we did a research study actually with the University of Michigan, and we released the findings, which I'll actually throw it in the chat in a little bit. And what was most interesting is so much of the thought about housing for seniors specifically is how can we keep seniors where they are for as long as possible? And for queer people, that is just not what we're interested in. We are actually so much more interested in aging in community, and specifically aging in our community, because so much, especially currently, there's just a lot of aging population that are still are still a little more homophobic, transphobic. And so there's just a lot more concern with the aging queer population, that they would just feel safer aging in community with each other. And on top of that, the people that are aging right now are those living with HIV. Often they are the survivors of the AIDS epidemic, as well as they existed in a time where marriage equality didn't exist. They weren't allowed to adopt children. So these are people that don't have families. Most of them were kicked out of homes when they were kids. So they're not connected to anyone. So they are pretty isolated. And so they are looking for that found sense of family rather than the typical heteronormative thought of what does aging look like? Where for a queer person, aging looks like something completely different. And so that was really interesting. And so all of that to say, I think something that is missing is more spaces for queer people to age together. I think we're doing something cool. Here in Ferndale, we have the Raymond Shepherd House that is going to open this fall, which is going to be great, which is senior housing that is obviously can't be just for the queer community because that's discriminatory, but it is designed for the queer community. And so we're hoping to see more things like that, but obviously there's, 60 beds in there, that's going to be gone instantly. And there's just so much more need than we have the capacity for. So
Is that going to be in Ferndale, did you say?
Yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah.
on, it's gonna be right on 9 Mile. I don't know if you all are in Ferndale much, but it's literally right on 9 Mile. It's kind of near like City Hall-ish.
Oh, perfect.
There's like I forget what everything is called, but you'll see it. It's like right on 9 Mile there. You'll see it's like the thing that they're building. It looks really
Cool.
nice.
Yep, I've seen it. I live in Oak Park, so
Oh,
yep, drive
perfect.
that way all the time. Cool. Very cool. It's exciting.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing about especially that housing option there at the end, Brendan. I hadn't heard of that before, and I think like as a queer person, I imagine what it would be like to age and having worked in long-term care facilities. It's not always the most accepting, so I definitely had the thought of I don't know that I would want to be in a nursing home. I don't know if I would be respected or if the staff would be respectful or how people would react to that. So it's so beautiful to know that spaces like that are being created and hopefully they will continue to grow. So that is so encouraging to hear. And I think a lot of the conversation that we've had today has been insightful and encouraging. And just watching the clock as we're getting down to the end here, I just want to thank everyone so much for coming and for being willing to engage and participate. I especially want to thank everyone who's been supporting me. Thank you, Laura, for helping me to plan and facilitate everything. Thank you, Stephanie, for helping plan everything behind the scenes and manage the Zoom. I'm thankful for Aaron Fox at the MADC who helped me do some advertising. Thank you, Kate, for being willing to do a presentation today. That was so kind of you and so educational, and I learned a lot of new information. And thank you to each of our community partners from each of our different organizations for being willing to speak about your services and being willing to form connections here so that we can continue to support each other and continue growing the network and the space for LGBTQ plus individuals and especially LGBTQ plus older adults in Michigan. And I think that's such a beautiful thing that we were all able to meet today. The next thing I'm going to do, I've noticed we've all been sharing resources in the chat. I'm going to attach a link to a post-evaluation survey. It would be so lovely if you could fill that out just on your experience here today. I'll also include it in a follow-up email that I'll send to each of you. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone so much. It's so wonderful that you've been here to support my efforts and support the efforts of the community. So that's
Can I
all
ask
that
a
we have.
question?
Of
Um,
course, Lori.
just some of this discussion has triggered something in me, and excuse my ignorance in this, but when we're talking about, you don't necessarily recognize people who are LGBTQ plus when they're in the community and that sort of thing. And that goes for people with dementia as well. It's not, people don't have a tattoo on their forehead that says I have Alzheimer's disease or I have Lewy body. Um, and that's one of the things that we do with Dementia Friendly Celine is these workshops that make businesses and banks and restaurants and other places in the community, places of worship, kind of attending our workshops to educate them on just how to be more welcoming. And even though you don't necessarily recognize that somebody's got dementia. Do things like that exist for LGBTQ plus as well? I mean, are there those sort of workshops or trainings that people could be giving? Maybe this exists, and again, please excuse my ignorance, but if people aren't aware that hey, there's LGBTQ plus folks attending my worship services or my you know wherever, my grocery store or a restaurant or something like that. Are there things like that that are similar to what we do for the dementia friendly community? Does that exist?
I would say, so I'll jump in and say absolutely. There's several different organizations that do that work. Corktown Health does it. I'm sure Ruth Ellis Center in Highland Park does it. I've heard reports that they do it. And then at Affirmations, our executive director also offers an LGBTQ inclusivity training herself as well. And so I actually put her email address in the chat in case anyone is interested in exploring something like that. But yeah, no, there are a lot of local organizations that are doing that work, which is awesome. And I am sure there are more organizations that are doing this on a state and national level that I'm not even thinking of off the top of my head. But yes, so absolutely, Lori, there are a lot of people that are doing that exact thing, which is great.
Thank you.
Okay, I saw that you had unmuted for a second. You were shaking your head. Did you have anything else that you wanted to share?
I just want to say, I ended up putting it in the chat, just that MyGen does it as well, and specifically to older adults, and the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services does SOGI trainings as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that, Lori, and being willing and curious about trainings that are available and being willing to move forward the mission of dementia-friendly Saline. And there are definitely opportunities out there, and I would be more than happy to include some of this information in the chat in the follow-up email as well, so that it's more
That would be great.
accessible.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Because I know we regularly do have several attendees at our movies and our memory cafes and things like that, that I know are LGBTQ plus. Probably some that I don't know are, but there are plenty that I do know of. But I think that that would be a kind of a good training for our staff as well. So like somebody mentioned, you know, it's like if you're able to step in if somebody is, you know, being discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or anything else, that we're prepared to kind of have a conversation and intercede in a situation like that. So that might be something that would be beneficial for us and our staff. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's always lovely to have education to know how to handle those situations and be prepared for when they come up. Thank you for asking that. And thank you for all of your contributions to today's conversation. Yeah, thank you all again for everything. That's all we have planned, but I'll stick around for a little bit in case there's any questions. And I'll of course send out follow-up email, but please fill out that post-evaluation survey if you're able to, and I'll send the link in the email. But thank you so much for your time and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.